What's up guys, it's Nathan here. In today's video, we're going to discuss the housing crisis in Queensland and the possibility of rental caps being introduced to alleviate some of the stress on families. Let's start off with the housing crisis in Queensland. In recent years, Queensland has faced a severe housing crisis with skyrocketing rental prices and long waiting lists for social housing. According to a report commissioned by the Queensland Council of Social Service, around 150,000 households are under housing stress, with 100,000 of them typically eligible for social housing. The actual social housing waiting list, however, stands at about 27,000, with the average wait times exceeding 2 years. This issue particularly affects families with children. Let's move on to the rental market inflation. Rental markets in Queensland have experienced the worst inflation in Australia, with the median rentals rising by 80% in Gladstone, 51% in Noosa, and 33% on the Gold Coast in the last 5 years. The proportion of affordable private rentals for low-income households dropping from 26% to 13%. And if you find value in these videos, please consider hitting that subscribe button, as it really helps out the channel, and a big thank you to all our subscribers for your support. Inspires us to create more content. We hope you enjoy. How did the Queensland government respond? They acknowledged the severity of the issue. Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk has confirmed that the rent caps will be discussed in an upcoming meeting with the government, industry and advocacy groups. The goal is to implement a rental cap system that helps alleviate the financial stress on families facing huge rental increases. The Queensland government has also considered purchasing properties under the National Rental Affordability Scheme, which is set to phase out in the next 2 years. This scheme aims to reduce the costs of rent for low to medium income family households. Let's look at the effects of interstate migration and international migration. The housing stress in Queensland is partially attributed to high levels of interstate migration, with international migration also expected to return to pre-pandemic levels this year. Homelessness services in the state have also faced increased pressure, with a 22% increase in homelessness over 4 years compared to the national average increase of 8%. Now, there is proposed rental caps being legislated already. The Greens MP for South Brisbane, Amy McMahon, had introduced a bill in the state government parliament last year calling for residential rent increases to be frozen for 2 years. After this period, rents could only be increased by 2% for every 24 months. The Queensland Housing Minister, Leanne Enrich, previously described this proposal as extremist and warned it could reduce housing supply in the private rental market. However, the Queensland Greens have welcomed the news that the government is now considering caps, stating that the broader measures are needed to address the housing affordability crisis. And remember to like, share and subscribe to stay informed to the latest news and insights for everything property and finance. There are calls for rental increases to be limited. Housing advocates in Queensland have been calling for rental increases to be limited as tenants face eviction due to soaring rental prices. Some propose linking rent increases to the Consumer Price Index, CPI, plus 10%, similar to laws in the Australian Capital Territory. However, the state government and real estate lobby groups argue that such restrictions may have little impact and could potentially deter owners and investors from entering in the market. We've also got to remember that there's been 10 rate rises in the last 11 months. Investors' repayments have increased nearly 3 times, so limiting rental increases could potentially have second and third order consequences, further reducing supply, because there's not going to be many mum and dad investors that can afford their mortgage repayments where rents can't increase, as we've seen with some pretty extreme rate hikes. Borrowers that have investment properties have also found that their mortgage repayments have increased nearly threefold, and not being able to increase their rent might actually have second and third order events where they might go, well, it's not worth having this investment property. We're going to sell out. And then those properties that were once investment properties are taken up by owner occupiers, further exacerbating the problem with less rental stock, and particularly where the government isn't investing enough capital or funds into social housing, it's just going to keep making the issue worse and worse. We'd love to know your thoughts and possible solutions on how we can fix this, because it is a very complicated and delicate issue. The impact on families and renters in the current housing crisis in Queensland has had a significant impact, with many facing eviction or being forced to move out of their homes. The lack of affordable housing and long waiting lists for social housing have left many people vulnerable, and there's calls for rental caps and rental increase limits are aimed at providing some relief for those struggling in the current market. Once again, this is a very delicate issue. It feels like the government is almost punishing the private sector, the mums and dads with investment properties, because the government hadn't invested enough in social housing or hadn't anticipated the issues that are now bubbling up, and limiting rental increases might only be a band-aid solution, and it also might have more effects in the future because it's disincentivizing investors from entering into the market. So once again, a really difficult one to get right here. Now let's take a look at the struggles faced by tenants due to skyrocketing rental price increases. We saw one Brisbane tenant, Nicholas, who recently experienced a 60% rental increase for his 2-bedroom apartment in South Brisbane. Previously, he was only paying $470 a week, and he was asked if he'd be willing to pay the new rate of $750 a week or move out. This drastic increase leaves Nicholas and his partner unable to afford the current property they're living in and forcing them to find a new home. Penny Carr, the chief executive at Tenants Queensland, said that rental increases are happening across the board, and in some cases, tenants are being presented with a take it or leave it form, forcing them to either accept the new rental agreement with a higher rate or leave the property altogether. This is having an impact on the community, with rent hikes not limited to individual tenants but extend to the entire community. More families are seeking help through organisations such as Shack Community Centre in Nambour, which provides assistance in various forms, from school lunches to full-blown family meals. With more people struggling to make ends meet, there is a growing need for support for communities and organisations. And this is where calls for rental caps and fare increases come into play. In light of these alarming increases, housing advocates such as Penny Carr have called for measures to limit rental increases need to be put into play. They propose that rental increases above inflation should only be allowed if justified by significant property improvements or other valid reasons. This would prevent landlords from taking advantage of market opportunities for short-term gains at the expense of tenants who can't afford these increases. Once again, we need to be careful here, because in Penny's case, she's calling for rent prices to be increased in line with inflation. But in recent times, we've seen rate hikes increase by a significant amount, where mortgage repayments have almost tripled. And in many cases, housing stock is at record levels of low because there's not enough investors in the market. So this is where it needs to be thought out thoroughly, and maybe looking at the supply issue and putting more supply on the market will then bring prices down. And that's where the government might need to come in and put some social housing up, or look at alternatives to address this issue, rather than a band-aid solution which could push more investors out of the market, therefore retaining low supply, keeping demand very high, and still pushing prices up. As well as that, there might be loopholes that people find to still increase their rent outside of the measures that are put in place. No doubt there is a need for change with the current housing crisis and thousands of people wanting social housing in Queensland. It's clear that something needs to change. Rental caps and fair rent increase policies could potentially provide much needed relief for tenants and create more stability in the market. But we also need to think about the issues that might be caused by limiting rent increases, where landlords are already wearing the higher costs of mortgage and borrowing costs. Could they potentially leave the market altogether? And these are things that need to be considered. It's crucial for the government, industry, and advocacy groups to come together and find a solution that addresses the root causes of the housing crisis and ensure all Queenslanders have access to safe, affordable, and secure housing. So that's it for today, guys. If you found value in this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more property and market insights. Drop any thoughts or questions you have below in the comments. And here at Hunter Galloway, we're a mortgage broker that deal with people Australia-wide. So if you need assistance and you're looking for a great mortgage broker in Australia, we can help. There's no cost for our service, and you can contact us at huntergalloway.com.au and fill in a contact form or call us directly on 1300 088 065, and we'll see you next time.